Hi, I'm Alex and welcome back to Dreams of Green. So today I'm going to show you how I plan on planting out an edible fire break in our main fire sector of our property. So what I've done is when we first moved here, I started planting fire retardant trees around the main area of our property. So a couple of species that I selected are the white mulberry, which I'm going to show you how I plant today, as well as the feijoa or pineapple guava, which is another great fire retardant tree that's also edible. And the other one, it's not edible, but it's super tough, and the previous owners thankfully planted a really dense hedge of it. So I'll show you now. This is the Photinia red robin. So what I've done, because the feijoas are quite slow growing, even though they're super tough, I planted this just in, when was it, autumn of this year. Just purchased some from the local nursery, and it's already overtaken my feijoas. So this is a really great alternative for something a bit faster growing. So you'll see as I wander down this way, I'll just show you quickly. So this is where, if I just pan around, you'll see this hedge here behind me is what the previous owners planted. So it's a really dense fire break. You can see the house down here. So if we do get those kind of really hot northerly or northwestern winds, this is a great thing to plant around the house. So now I head to the back fence where our prevailing summer winds are, where we currently have no trees, and I'll show you exactly what I'm planting. So here we are at our back fence. You can see just behind me here, we just had a big wood pile. Anything that couldn't fit in our very small electric mulcher got placed here. And whilst it wasn't maybe such a problem because it was so wet, now that we're getting into that dry period, what we've been doing is clearing this wood pile. It was also a haven for brown snakes, and I really don't want those next to the house where the veggie patch is. So we're clearing this wood pile. I'm using all of that beautiful timber, which is starting to break down, just along our row of citrus out the front of the house, just to help build up the soil and that heavy clay. So I had planted things like, there's a couple of pecans here, but they're a little bit slower growing. They'll be a fantastic shade tree and also act as kind of a fire break as well once they start getting up. But the reason I've chosen mulberries, I've got a mango there as well, couple of other fruit trees, but the mulberry is just so fast growing, and I really want to put something in the ground that's going to get up very quickly. So just one wet season, and with those white mulberries, we've already got that height established, and we're already harvesting some fruit. So if I wander down this way, this behind me, this is huge, this behind me is our white mulberry. So to have a row of this white mulberry behind me acting as a fire break will be absolutely amazing. The other thing is I have to think about stacking functions as well, because this gate here behind me, so this gate is the main entryway to kind of the back of the property, but also the veggie patch. And what happens is the afternoon winds just come funneling through here, and that has been a big reason why our veggie garden is drying out so quickly. So in establishing this fire break, I'm also establishing a windbreak for the veggie patch as well. And also on this very steep cut kind of above me, I've got things like citrus, there's persimmon, there's some different guavas and things like that. So again, that is really going to help this area here, because the wind howls through. It's going to help protect those trees and stop this very steep slope from drying out as well. So let's just go to the back of the gate. I'll show you what I'm doing. So I've just gone to the home nursery. This is the great thing when you're propagating your own plants. You've always got a ready supply of different trees. So I'll show you behind me. So I've just started laying out the trees just in a straight line. So I've positioned 3 white mulberries and then 2 feijoas in between. The beauty of the feijoas as well is I don't want to block that winter sun from my veggie patch. So of course the white mulberries are deciduous, so that will allow the sun through. The feijoas are slower growing, and you can hedge the feijoas. So if they're blocking the sun a bit, I'm able to basically trim those back and still have them acting as a low wind barrier as well. So that's what we're going to do today. And the other thing as well that I want to mention is you see the distance between the fence and the trees. So this is really important, and something I failed to do when I first started planting kind of the firebreak trees on the western side of the property. So now we're on the eastern side of the property, is I didn't allow enough space between the fence and the trees to get the mower through. So this is really important, because now the western side of the property I have to maintain with a brush cutter, and that is so much harder work than a ride-on mower. So you'll notice with the positioning is between the trees here and the fence line. I've measured, I've got enough room. Like, it doesn't have a big mower deck, our mower, so but it is enough room for me to get through and help maintain the grass along this system. So I'll show you now how I plant them, and also how to make sure when you're on a slope, you want to be directing that water into the tree and where it's needed. So I'll show you just how to shape like a mini berm on the lower side of the tree to help capture that water runoff. This is my tool. It is such a simple tool, but I've actually planted thousands of trees on the property with this simple tool. So it's just a mini matic. The reason I love it, this blunt end here, or it's quite sharp, but in terms of the thicker end here, this is the end that I use to clear the grass where I'm going to plant. And this pointy end here, I use to loosen up the clay. So loosen up the soil when I'm planting the hole. So because all of my plantings are kind of on a hill slope, I've found this to be a really useful tool. So now I'll show you just how to shape the holes to make sure that you're maximizing that water runoff, capturing it in the hole, and not just letting that kind of sheet off the hill, missing your trees. The other thing that you'll notice is, because I'm just planting just a handful of trees today, I've actually got some newspaper. Again, normally I don't use this when I'm doing mass plantings, but I've got the newspaper because I'm going to use the newspaper with a handful of compost and then mulch heavily on the top, because that's going to really help maintain my moisture just coming into the driest, hottest part of the year. The other thing I've got is, as I mentioned, just a bucket of, this is just homemade compost. And when you're using things like newspaper or cardboard and lots of straw, they're very high in carbon. So in here's fairly high nitrogen mix, just because you don't want when the high carbon elements break down, they can potentially rob nitrogen from your plant as they're breaking down. So when you add the compost, you get that nice balance that both feed the plant. So these, as I said, these trees I'm planting need to be potted up. So the compost and nutrients is quite depleted in the soil. So this will give them a nice boost. And then I just use simple watering can like this. So just a simple watering can just to water everything in. Okay, so I've done the first couple. So now I'll just do the third one. Again, when I'm planting, I'm just lining up my trees, trying to make sure as well I'm maintaining the distance from the fence, so about there. So I'll just mark where I'm planting. And then what you want to do is just shape the soil so that that runoff, you're going to create like a mini berm on the lower end of the slope to capture that water. So you can see this end I'm just using to get out these big clumps of grass. And here comes my white chicken, because when I'm planting trees, she follows me around the paddock and gets all of the worms. Hello, come to help. And now I'm just using the pointy end just to loosen up that soil and try and make my life a bit easier. So once you've got your mini berm there and you've got adequate depth to make sure that the soil will cover the roots of the tree, again, you just want that little bowl. We've got adequate drainage because we're on the slope. Then what I do, grab the tree, just flip it upside down with your hands either side of the stalk like that, just over the hole, so any material that falls out will go into the hole, and just position it. You want to just make sure that you're lining the trunk so that it's straight. Okay, and then I'll just use this just to, again, shape the hole uphill, and that helps me just fill the hole with a bit of topsoil and just create a slightly larger catchment area for my tree. And just kind of pat it down so it's kind of like a little mini half-moon trench uphill of the tree. Then I give once I've patted the soil down around the tree just to stabilize it. I want to use probably a whole watering can per tree just because the soil's quite dry at the moment. Then I'm just going to put in a handful of compost, so that's full of all beautiful microbes as well. So a few handfuls around the base of the tree to add some nutrients. Then just give that another water. Then what I'm doing is I'm going to place this newspaper around, again, just to really reduce the effects of evaporation, because we've got those prevailing summer winds coming through here. Everything along here really dries out. So I think having this here, once they get up, is really going to help all of my trees on the slope here as well. So when you're placing your newspaper, you just want to make sure it's forming like a bowl to help capture. You don't want the newspaper like this where the rainfall would sheet off. So again, make sure all that rainfall is directed into the trunk of the tree. And the key is as well, make sure you soak, give your newspaper a good soak. So you can see that that's sheeting off, so I don't want that. So I'll just build up this berm edge just to make sure that that water's been captured where it's needed most. Okay, then I've got a heap of freshly mown grass around here, so this is great because there's sticks, there's straw, there's some beautiful soil underneath this wood pile that kind of mimics a forest floor. So I just want to cover that newspaper fairly well just so it doesn't dry out. Just on the last tree in the row, so I'm just looking down the row just to make sure they're all in a nice line. So again, just mounding up that berm on the lower side of the hill just to capture that water in. And then we've got a big clump of grass here, so just getting that blunt end of the mattock. And of course, I don't like doing this during the hottest part of the day because it is quite a workout. So it's nice and early in the morning, so it's a lovely time to be planting before it gets too hot. So then what you can do too is you can turn these heavy roots upside down with their roots exposed to the light so they don't take root again, and that will help create a bit of a barrier to slow the flow of water off. So if you place your roots like that, they won't grow and form those dense clumps right next to your tree again. So now if I show you the back gate, we've got this fantastic established white mulberry here right in that wind sector, so providing some morning shade for the nursery there, which is great, as well as that fire protection. If I pan across, I actually have a line of ice cream bean, which are also fire retardant, leading up to the carport, which is kind of like a wind tunnel through this gate. Then on this hill, I've got several white mulberries following the curve of that cut, as well as a couple of hardy citrus, some other fire retardant guavas for joas. Then you can see here you've got the row of the 3 white mulberries, as well as the 2 feijoas in between. Again, you just want to avoid, in this fire sector, you just want to avoid things like conifers and eucalypts. And again, usually this paddock next door will get slashed at this time of the year, so that's going to also help greatly help reduce that potential fire load. But another thing that helps over the hill here, it's all heavily grazed actually. So if you have a look, there's not a lot of fuel. So there's no like fire corridor coming from the bush at the back. There's a huge gap with all kind of heavily grazed pasture, so there's no fuel kind of on the other side of that slope. So all of these things are helping protect the house. And we also had quite a few conifers around the house, so we removed those and just replaced them with fruit trees, which are all a great fire break. So that just gives you an idea of some of the fire retardant trees that I've planted around the property. And if you'd like to know more about how to propagate these trees, or how I've established all of these tree systems in the rest of the property, feel free to subscribe. And I'd love to know also what you've planted in your own property and what you recommend for fire retardant species to help that fire risk around the home. The other thing I forgot to mention too is anytime you're planting new trees and you have chickens, keep them far away from your new plantings because they will dig them out. And if you have things like kangaroos or deer, you may need to put tree guards around your new plantings as well. But for me, I think these will be fine as long as I keep my chickens away. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.